My name is Justin Weinbrenner, and this is my CSA final argument. And my argument is going to be about the coronavirus. People who reject the restrictions of the coronavirus and proceed with their normal lives are at fault for not being altruistic enough. Certain restrictions may include the stay-at-home order or quarantining after being tested or being tested positive with the virus, avoiding large crowds, mostly over 10 people or more. Most of that comes with the younger generation of people that attend bars or parties. And the other restriction is wearing masks. In this video, I will argue that there's a problem of rejecting altruism and favoring egotism within the country when it comes to dealing with the coronavirus. Many of the people that ignore these restrictions within the coronavirus do not have any pre-existing medical conditions. However, that is not a good enough excuse for ignoring these restrictions and being egotistical rather than altruistic about the situation. There are restrictions set up in society to avoid certain possible risks that could happen if you get COVID. For example, there's a few risks that are possible. Number one, there is no guarantee that someone can beat the virus. Even if you are, quote unquote, the healthiest man alive or healthiest woman alive, there's still no guarantee that you can beat the virus without any pre-existing issues. Also, there's no guarantee that there will be any lasting effects from the virus. So if you get the virus and you beat it, there are still potential complications that will arise down the road that will affect your life, basically. One of those could be breathing issues, especially dangerous for someone who has asthma. However, if someone is completely healthy and they do get the virus, there are long-term breathing issues that could arise. Also, there are cardiac issues that could also arise after you get the coronavirus. Basically, it is such a new virus that nobody really knows the long-term effects of this virus. Also, just because you have no symptoms or you are not affected by this virus, there's a high possibility that you can be a transmitter of the virus. So what that means is if you get the virus, you can pass it on to someone who is or could be vulnerable for this virus. And all of this could be avoided if people took a less egotistic approach when it comes to denying or rejecting these restrictions put out on society by our government. Earlier in the semester in class, we discussed core moral principles of utilitarianism related to egotism. In the systematic effort to determine what is right and wrong, morality is not about advancing your self-interest, nor is it about complete denial of oneself. What morality is about following the system. At times this may be beneficial to you, and at times it may undermine or contradict your self-interest. But in either case, the point is to follow the system. This proves that it is important for people to follow the restrictions and guidelines of the coronavirus. And even if it may not be in your best immediate interest to follow those restrictions, it will be better off for the entirety of society moving forward with those restrictions if they are followed. There needs to be an equal balance between the level of egotism and altruism within society. In this situation, failure to be altruistic is negatively affecting the population that is at risk or has people around them at risk for the coronavirus. Basically, what altruism is showing selfless concern for the well-being of others. However, in this situation, one does not need to be completely for other people when it comes to coronavirus. However, this should be a good equal mix between egotism and altruism, therefore that they aren't fully focused on other people, but they aren't fully focused on themselves as well. Yeah, of being overly altruistic. In class, we discussed the idea of complete altruism, which is the abandonment of oneself so as to devote yourself wholly to others. And in this instance of the coronavirus, that is not necessarily what needs to be done. To object, for those who are not at high risk, should have the ability to decide for themselves. So they should be able to decide what they can do and what they cannot do. So basically, they should be able to decide whether or not they can follow those restrictions. Because regardless of the risk, people that have the right to put their best interests first, and in some instances, people are out of work and cannot provide for themselves and others. So there comes to a certain point where if they are told to quarantine for 2 weeks, however, if they take 2 weeks off of work, they may not be able to put food on the table for their family. Therefore, to object to the restrictions, people should be able to make decisions for themselves in this situation. To provide a rebuttal to that objection, the world is almost a year into the pandemic, and there are many ways where people can decide what's best for themselves without hurting the people in the society that are at risk. So one can pursue one's goals and desires without disrespecting others of society. Um, and if some of these restrictions do put people out of work, there are unemployment stimulus checks from the government being given out to those who cannot work during this time. Also, there have been food banks throughout the country that have been giving out food to people in need throughout this pandemic. Egotistical about COVID restrictions and also not being too altruistic about putting yourself at risk, there is the idea we discussed earlier in the semester of natural law. Based upon human nature, we are provided a moral code. The code corresponds to basic ends and objectives that we are oriented towards and naturally attracted to. The specific principles of natural law that I'm referring to, that if you are too egotistical or too altruistic in the sense that they break in this situation. The principle of natural law that is relevant is a principle of preservation of life. We are naturally meant to take actions that preserve and further life. So therefore, these restrictions of COVID are necessary and need to be followed, therefore that we can preserve the life of our society and our country and the people that are not only not vulnerable, but the people that are vulnerable of this virus. To conclude, the virus is very deadly and it affects more people than it does not affect. It is important to remain overly altruistic rather than egotistical throughout this pandemic because you don't truly know the situation of others and even your own throughout this because it's very unpredictable. There's no better time to drop your ego than right now. And this argument has further proven that there's a problem of rejecting altruism and favoring egotism within the country when it comes to dealing with this coronavirus.